Whoa! Oh my god. So in my last few episodes, I got started disassembling my entire suspension, even though I don't really have any experience working on this stuff. But I somehow managed to make a lot of progress disconnecting the tie rods, removing the lower ball joints, and removing the front shocks. So in this one, I'm going to disassemble the rest of my suspension so that I'll be ready when the new parts come in. So after struggling so much on this lower ball joint, it felt so good to finally pull it out.
Finally, it's out! Brand new one, finally. Oh my god.
And then all I had to do was just pop in the new one and put the 3 bolts back in.
Yes. Man, it feels so good to finally be at the torquing down stage. It's like the home stretch of this whole installation. I really was starting to think, oh, I'll never get this done.
Right. Wow, that's so much tighter.
Woo! So here's a couple of the broken parts I pulled off this yesterday and today. The right ball joint, the left ball joint, the right end link. Yeah, they're pretty worn out. This one I ripped out the boot a little while I was working on it, so it didn't actually look like this. But this grease was leaking out because it was already cracked. And this one's also cracking there. So cracking or may have even leaked. It was kind of hard to tell. So I just wanted to take care of everything, so there won't be any future problems. Oh my god.
Yeah, I was pretty exhausted after 2 days of getting stuck on that lower ball joint.
Man, I can't believe it's actually on. Alright, time to clean up.
Alright, so I'm almost done with my work for the week. I replaced the lower ball joints, and the last remaining suspension task I have with the parts I have available is putting the rear sway bar back on. When I got the car, it came with broken end links, and so I got all the parts now. My main concern is that I have a huge package coming from Super Miata tomorrow that has all the coilovers and the rest of the suspension parts that I need. So I don't want to get to a point where I have so many parts I'm kind of overwhelmed with the work I need to do. So I'm rushing to get all the work done with the parts I have, so I'm not too overwhelmed when the rest of the parts start rolling in. So this weekend I'm getting the new coilovers, all the tie rods, and the upper ball joints are coming in, and then the new wheels and tires are coming in Monday as well. Oh, and then the new front brake lines are coming in as well, since the ones I have right now are too short. So I got the lower ball joints done this week, and now I'm going to try and get the rear sway bar back on, and then I'll be ready for the package tomorrow. Yeah. So if you remember from one of my first episodes, I have the sway bar that came with this car, and it has the broken end link stuck to them, but they were completely stuck. Like, I could not get them off. So what I ended up doing is buying a new used sway bar to put the replacement end links on. And the one thing I hadn't really realized is I wasn't sure which orientation the end link should go in. So what I did is I just lined it up next to the old one to make sure I'm putting them in the right orientation. And you would think that installing a sway bar would be pretty easy because it's just a couple of bolts that attach to the car. But of course, I found it pretty difficult because the end links were in the way and it was really hard to fit up back there behind the muffler.
Okay, new idea. I don't put the end links on until the end.
Okay, so try 2, no biggie. I've never installed a sway bar before, how else would I have known? So I got started trying to put it back in without the sway bar and snake it back there behind the muffler. But I still kept bumping into everything.
Alright, so take these off too.
So then, after I moved those bushings that you use to attach to the car, I was finally able to get the sway bar in.
Hey. Ah. I just realized because there's a tilt to the sway bar, I might have put it in upside down. I think I did it right. Cool. They're in. Officially on. Although I just realized when I do change out these struts, I might have to take it all out again. But now I have a rear sway bar. I'm ready for tomorrow.
So now that I'd finished everything that I could remember that I needed to do, I figured, hey, why not make use of the last hour of sunlight and get some extra work done that I've been wanting to do. And one of those was fixing my passenger window, which was really slow to go down.
Alright, so I'm gonna try and grease the window track and see if that helps. Yeah.
So my plan of attack here was actually pretty simple. Just pull off the door card and spray the window tracks with some spray lube that is specifically meant for window tracks. And hopefully that would make the windows smoother while going down. And after I got the door card off, I made a pretty interesting discovery.
Someone's been in here before. This cable has gone the wrong way. Aha! Someone has literally fixed this before. Wow. Someone has been in here before, and you can see that there's a zip tie back there. That zip tie is what I was gonna come in and fix. Wow. Interesting. Yeah, all of this gunk came off way too easy, so it's pretty clear someone came in, they put this through the wrong spot, and they zip tied it. I'm gonna see why it's still a little slow though. Great, I got lube all over it. Hey, they're about the same speed now. Wow. It's actually fast on the driver's side, which was the fast one.
So it's definitely not perfect, but the window definitely moves much more smoother than it did before, and it felt good to finally solve that problem that I'd kept experiencing every time I went on a drive.
Alright, today's delivery day. So before the rest of my suspension parts, my coilovers, my brake lines come in, I'm going to get started on disconnecting the upper ball joints, which I'm sure are going to take so much longer than I'm expecting. So at least I'll be a little bit prepared for when the shipment arrives and I can get back on the road faster.
So the interesting part about the upper ball joints is they're not actually held in by a bunch of bolts, they're just purely friction.
Alright, so that was just floating around.
So all I need to do is remove the one bolt that holds that connects the joint, and then just pop it out.
Honestly, now that I'm looking at it, this upper ball joint looks fine. Let me check the other. Yeah, the other one's the one that's broken open. This one looks really good, but I wonder... Oh, it's got the beginning of cracking. I think I'm just going to replace it.
So I went into this with really low expectations. On both the lower... I got really stuck on both the lower ball joints, and I was expecting to spend hours, maybe even days on these. And it just popped off.
Easy.
I was pretty shocked how easy this was. I really was pretty scarred by every single bolt taking much more longer than before.
Aha.
And so to get the ball joint out, I actually had to pull out the entire upper control arm that it's attached to. And from here, what you're supposed to do is press it out. It's just held by friction in there. So I borrowed this ball joint press tool from AutoZone and got started trying to push it out. But the weird, interesting part about this tool is it comes with a bunch of different cylinders and shapes so to fit your ball joint so you can press it out. And there's not really any directions of what you're supposed to do. I kind of just had to mix and match and see what fits them right and what wouldn't slip. And then trying to also do that while the control arm is holding everything at an angle made it even more difficult because the whole stack of things kept trying to fall over. So it was a bit of a hassle trying to push this joint out.
I think it's going.
And I remember it was around this moment that I was thinking, what a weird situation I found myself in. Just a few weeks prior, I didn't know anything about working on cars, and here I was with an entire part of the suspension pulled out, trying to pop the ball joint out.
Dude, it's definitely moving. I'm an idiot.
It was honestly pretty funny how hard it was to make sure I was using the right attachments to push it out.
I do it like this. No, I'm not. Select a little cup. Almost there.
The fun part about pulling out the upper ball joint versus the lower ball joint is you can actually see the progress you're making. You can see the joint slowly starting to pop out. Whereas with the lower ball joint, that just wasn't a thing.
I'm just gonna use a wrench socket.
And voila. Just like that.
Oh, it worked.
It was quite nice how easy that actually was. I was really expecting to spend 2 full days on this.
Ta-da! Cool. Now for the other side.
So it turns out the more you work on cars, the easier things get, right? I mean, this was all coming out so easily. No. I had a pretty funny issue here where the way that this ball joint rubber was broken, there was no room to fit the separator tool in. So I had to spend a while just prying some of that rubber out with a knife and some pliers until I could finally fit the tool in. And guess what? It popped. Yes. Why couldn't the lower ball joint have been this easy? So the last thing I had to do to get this ball joint out was pull out that bolt that holds the upper control arm, and then I could pull the whole thing out. Now this was an interesting discovery.
Oh wow.
A lot of these ball joints honestly aren't in that bad of a shape. It's more that the rubber is broken, the grease has leaked, and I don't know how much dirt has gotten in. Some of it is a bit precautionary, but this ball joint was actually very worn out. It shouldn't have been moving that easily.
Alright, it's going. Slowly. Hey, it moved quite a lot. And the rubber boot has like completely started coming off, or it's gone. There's no rubber boot anymore. Wow. You can kind of just see the joint there, and you can see a little bit of metal there, like the clean metal that's poking through. So it's definitely coming out. Whew. And then I use like a socket on the other way. Hey, I think it went. Okay, not all the way, but it's almost there.
At this point, I felt like I could just push it out a little, so I tried just pressing my body weight and like banging it a bunch. I really didn't want to reassemble the whole stack again.
Hey! Another one. Wow, yeah, so the boot was almost coming off, and now with me prying at it, this is what it looks like without a boot. Interesting. Nice.
So with all the ball joints pulled out, I got started on unscrewing this pretty worn out tie rod so that it would be ready to go for the new part.
Aha! Alright, what do we got here?
And you can probably guess what happened.
Whoa.
I got stuck. It's just, all I have to do is turn the tie rod. It's basically just one big bolt. But it turns out my adjustable wrench wouldn't go big enough to pull it out. So instead I just moved on to pulling out the rear shocks, which funny enough also meant disconnecting the sway bar and end links that I'd spent so much time putting in. So pulling up the back shock was actually much easier than the front. All I had to do was remove 2 bolts that were on the top of the shock that you can access from inside the trunk, and then the one big bolt that connects it to the lower control arm. But when that wasn't moving much, I did some research, and it turns out that I need to remove one more bolt in the middle so that the control arm can actually extend farther out, allowing the shock to come out.
Oh my god.
And you can see how much more slack that gives me to pull out the shock. But I realized that that slack was pulling on the speed sensor wire, so I made sure to disconnect that to give it a little bit more room. And then, just like that,
Haha!
the shock came out.
Did it!
I felt like I was really starting to get the hang of this, so with a little bit more confidence, I got started working on the other side, thinking, hey, you know what? I've pulled out 3 shocks on this car now. How hard could it be? But it turns out there was actually a lot of stuff in the way of that bolt, and I wasn't exactly sure why. But first I gave my sister a little tour of my progress.
All the springs, if you look in here, you see springs on the ground. Replacement upgraded versions of those. And then in the front, I don't know how much you can tell, it's all fucked. Like, look at that.
So I got back to pulling out the 2 bolts on the top of the left shock. I mean, I'm just working on 2 bolts. Why does it have to be this hard?
I don't understand why this has to be so tough to reach the strut on the left side here. You see it back there, that little bolt? There's another one next to it that you can't even see from here. I had to rip apart the entire trunk liner to get to it and take off a metal bracket here. Or it's for the right, you pull this back and boom, there's where the strut used to go, right in that hole. I had to pull apart all of this trunk lining and the metal bracket, and even then it was so difficult that I had to use all these different extensions to make it work.
Okay, so it turns out I'm just an idiot. The gas cap is right there. So that big tube is the tube that the fuel flows through to get to the fuel tank, and there's so much protection there to make sure any cargo or luggage doesn't damage or disconnect the fuel so that you don't pour fuel in your trunk. That makes so much more sense. So finally, I got to the last bolt to pull out my last shock.
Whoa! Yeah! Oh, I forgot the sway bar. That's not good.
I can only imagine how much my neighbors must love me. And finally, with that shock out, my entire suspension was officially disassembled for me to put in all the new parts. I honestly didn't really think I would get this far, and I kind of felt a little crazy for just diving headfirst in. I mean, if you had no experience working on a car and you found out that you needed to take apart your entire suspension, you'd be kind of crazy too for deciding to do that all on your own. But it was quite nice and fulfilling. So my confidence is growing with this project, and I'm excited to finally get the new coilovers and the new parts in. So stay tuned for the next episode, and thank you for watching.